When my son told me I wasn't his family anymore, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I smiled at him. A small, quiet smile. It wasn't because I was happy. It was because my heart hurt so much that my face didn't know what else to do. It was like something inside me just stopped. The breath left my lungs, and for a second, the world went completely silent. I could see his mouth still moving, but all I could hear was a loud ringing in my ears. That one sentence. 6 little words. You're not my family anymore. They cut deeper than any knife ever could. Because a knife wounds the body, but words can wound the soul. And this came from my baby. The little boy I held in my arms, the one who used to run to me with a scraped knee, the one who whispered, "I love you, Mama," before falling asleep. That little boy was gone. In his place was a stranger, a grown man with hard eyes and a cold heart. And I just stood there in his driveway with my one small suitcase at my feet, and I smiled. Because if I had opened my mouth to speak, I would have shattered into a million pieces right there on the concrete. I would have fallen apart, and I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing that. So I smiled, picked up my suitcase, and walked away. I had nowhere to go, but I knew I couldn't stay. Not in that house. Not in his life. Not anymore. My name is Eleanor. But everyone always called me Ellie. I'm 73 years old now. My hair is completely white, and my hands aren't as steady as they used to be. But my memory is still as sharp as a tack. And I remember the day my son Mark was born like it was yesterday. It was a hot summer night in July. His father, Thomas, was so nervous he wore a hole in the hospital waiting room floor with his pacing. And when the nurse finally placed that tiny, wrinkled, red-faced bundle in my arms, I felt a love so powerful it took my breath away. It was a love that was pure and fierce and absolute. I looked into his little face, his tiny fingers wrapped around my thumb, and I promised him everything. I promised to protect him, to love him, to always be his home. Thomas and I worked hard. He was a mechanic, and I cleaned houses for families in the nicer part of town. We didn't have much money, but our little house was always filled with love. It was filled with the smell of baking bread on Sundays and the sound of Mark's laughter. We had a small vegetable garden in the back, and Mark's job was to pick the tomatoes. He'd always eat more than he put in the basket, with the juice running down his chin. He was a good boy, a little shy, but with a kind heart. He used to bring home stray kittens, and we'd have to find homes for them. He'd give his allowance to a homeless man downtown. Thomas and I would look at each other over his head, our eyes meeting, and we knew we'd done something right. We'd raised a boy with a good soul. When Mark was 16, his daddy died. A heart attack.
Just like that.
One minute Thomas was there fixing the lawnmower, and the next he was gone. It was the darkest time of my life. I thought I would drown in the grief. But I had Mark.
And he needed me.
So I put one foot in front of the other. I got up every morning. I made his breakfast. I went to work. I held him when he cried for his father at night. We clung to each other, 2 survivors on a small raft in a big, dark sea. I think that's when we became more than mother and son. We became a team. It was just the 2 of us against the world.
And we made it.
We made it through. After high school, Mark got a scholarship to a college a few hours away.
I was so proud of him.
The house felt so empty without him. I'd walk past his room and see the posters still on the wall, his baseball glove on the shelf, and my heart would ache with missing him. But that's what you want for your children.
You want them to fly.
You want them to have a life bigger and better than your own. And he did. He studied hard, became an accountant. He got a good job in the city. He met a girl. Her name was Vanessa. She was beautiful.
Polished.
She came from a family with money. The kind of family that had a summer house and took vacations in Europe. When he brought her home to meet me for the first time, I could tell she was nervous. She looked around my small house, at my old furniture, my chipped teacups. She was polite, but I could see it in her eyes. She was from a different world. They got married a year later. It was a small wedding, not the big church affair Vanessa's family probably wanted. They were young, just starting out. I helped where I could. I saved for months to buy them a nice set of towels as a wedding gift. Soft, fluffy, cream-colored ones. Mark hugged me tight and said, "Thanks, Mom. They're perfect." Vanessa smiled and said, "Thank you, Eleanor." She always called me Eleanor. Never Mom. It was a small thing, but it was a line she drew, and I respected it. I was just happy to see Mark so happy. He looked at her like she was the sun and the moon and all the stars. And I understood that kind of love. I'd had it with his father. I was glad he'd found it, too. Then the grandbabies came. First a girl, Chloe. Then a boy, Noah. My heart grew 3 sizes that day, just like the Grinch. I was a grandmother. Nana. That's what they called me. Nana. I would drive the 2 hours to the city as often as I could. I'd bring my homemade applesauce and little knitted hats and books I'd bought at the church rummage sale. I wanted to be a part of their lives. I wanted to be the kind of grandmother who was always there, but I could feel things changing. Slowly at first, like a tiny crack in a window pane. The first time I visited after Noah was born, I went to pick up Chloe to give her a hug. She ran to me, and I lifted her up, spinning her around like we always did. Vanessa came out of the kitchen, and her face went stiff. "Eleanor," she said, her voice tight. "We don't pick the children up like that. It's not good for their backs. And we don't spin them. It could make them dizzy and they might fall." I felt my face go red. I put Chloe down gently. "Of course, dear," I said.
I'm sorry.
I didn't mean. I was just so happy to see her. Later that evening, I was helping Chloe with a puzzle on the floor. She was struggling with a piece, and I leaned over to help guide her hand. "Nana, you smell like mothballs," she said, with the innocent honesty of a 5-year-old. Vanessa, who was on the couch with the baby, let out a small, quiet laugh. She tried to hide it behind her hand, but I saw it. I saw her and Mark exchange a quick look. A look that said, "See what we have to deal with."
I pretended de hadn't noticed.
I laughed along. "That's just my old coat from the back of the closet, sweet pea," I told Chloe. "Nana needs to get a new one." But inside, a small, sharp stone had lodged itself in my chest. I was becoming the strange, old woman in their perfect, modern life. The visits became harder. Every time I went, there were new rules. "Please wipe your feet 3 times, Eleanor. We just had the rugs cleaned. Please don't give the children sweets. We're doing a sugar detox. Please don't tell them those stories about the farm. We don't want them to be afraid of animals." My stories about growing up on my grandfather's farm, about the cow that got loose, and the chickens that followed me everywhere, those were apparently scary. My applesauce, which Mark had loved as a boy, was now too sugary. The knitted sweaters I spent weeks on were lovely, but the yarn might be a little itchy for Noah's sensitive skin. I started to feel like a guest in my son's life. An unwanted guest who overstayed her welcome. I would call on a Tuesday to ask if I could come visit the following weekend. There would be a long pause on the other end of the line. "This weekend," Mark would say. Let me check with Vanessa. We might have a play date. Or, we were thinking of taking the kids to the museum.
I'll
Call you back." He'd call back, and it was always a no. "Sorry, Mom, it's not a good weekend." The weekends that were good became fewer and farther between. When I did go, I felt like I was walking on eggshells. I was terrified of doing the wrong thing, of saying the wrong thing. I'd watch Vanessa parent the children. Everything was so structured, so scheduled. Organic snacks at exactly 10:15. Educational television for exactly 30 minutes. No running in the house. No raising your voice. It was so different from the way I'd raised Mark, where he played outside until the streetlights came on and got dirty and skinned his knees, and life was messy and loud and full of laughter. One afternoon, I was watching Chloe draw at the kitchen table. She was drawing a picture of our family. She drew Mark, Vanessa, Noah, herself, and then a small, hunched figure off to the side. "Who's that?" I asked, pointing. "That's you, Nana," she said, not looking up from her crayon. "Daddy says you live far away." That one stung. I lived 2 hours away. It wasn't the other side of the world. But in their world, I was far away. I was on the outside. The tension finally broke one Sunday afternoon. It was Chloe's birthday. She was turning 7. I had saved up for months to buy her a special gift. Not clothes, not a book. I bought her a beautiful, old-fashioned dollhouse from a thrift store. It wasn't new, and it wasn't plastic. It was wooden, with little rooms and tiny furniture. I had spent weeks fixing it up, repainting the tiny chairs, sewing little curtains for the windows. I even made a tiny family to live in it, a mama, a daddy, a little girl, and a baby. I thought it was perfect. It was made with love. With my own 2 hands that I arrived at their house, my heart full of
excitement.
I could barely contain myself. I wanted to see the look on Chloe's face. When she opened the box, her eyes went wide. She touched the little roof, the tiny shutters. "It's a little house, Nana," she whispered. She was enchanted. She immediately started moving the little family into the living room. My heart soared. But then Vanessa came over. She looked into the box. She picked up one of the tiny chairs I had so carefully painted. She looked at the little fabric curtains. Her smile was tight. "That's very creative, Eleanor," she said. Her voice was flat. "But we were hoping to get her that new digital art tablet she's been asking for. This is, well, it's a little old-fashioned, isn't it?"
And it's used.
We try to give the children new things. It was like a slap in the face. All the love, all the work, all the saving, it was reduced to being used and old-fashioned. Mark was standing behind her, holding a piece of birthday cake. He saw my face. He saw the hurt I couldn't hide. But he just looked down at his plate. He didn't say a word. He didn't defend me. He didn't say, "Mom made that, it's beautiful." He just stood there, silent. Later that evening, after the party was over, the kids were in bed, and I was getting ready to drive home. I was in the guest room, packing my small bag. I heard their voices from the living room. They were raised.
Arguing.
About me. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help it. The walls were thin. "It's not about the dollhouse, Vanessa." Mark's voice, frustrated. "It's about boundaries. She comes here and does what she wants. She fills the kids' heads with stories about the past. She doesn't follow our rules." "She's your mother, Mark," Vanessa said, her voice sharp. "She's not some stranger. She loves those children. She loves them in her own way," Mark said. "But her way isn't our way. She makes you uncomfortable. I can see it. She makes everything difficult. She lives in the past, Vanessa. She doesn't understand our life. She doesn't fit in here." I stood frozen in the guest room, my old coat in my hands. The words echoed in my head. She doesn't fit in here. I was a puzzle piece from the wrong box, trying to force myself into a picture where I didn't belong. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling. I felt like I was 16 again, just after Thomas died, drowning in that same dark sea. But this time, the person I was clinging to for survival was the one pushing me under. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how my son, my sweet little boy, had become a man who could say I didn't fit into his life. I thought about leaving right then, driving home in the middle of the night. But it was late, I was tired, and my eyes were too blurry with tears to see the road. So I waited until the first gray light of dawn crept into the room. I got dressed quietly. I made my way to the kitchen to make a cup of tea before I left. I just wanted to slip away unnoticed. But Mark was already there, sitting at the kitchen island, a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked up when I came in. His face was tired, but it was also hard. Closed off. "Morning, Mom," he said. His voice was flat. "Morning, honey," I whispered. I went to the kettle. My hands were still shaking. "We need to talk," he said. I stopped. My hand hovered over the kettle. "Okay," I said, my voice small. I turned to face him. He didn't look at me. He stared into his coffee cup. "It's about last night," he started. "About the dollhouse." "I'm sorry if I overstepped," I said quickly. The words tumbled out. "I just thought she'd like it. I didn't mean to cause any trouble.
I was just trying to do something nice."
"I won't bring any more gifts without asking first. I promise." He finally looked at me. His eyes weren't angry. They were worse. They were empty. "It's not just the dollhouse, Mom," he said. "It's everything. The way you are with the kids. You undermine
Us.
You tell them stories that scare them. You bring chaos into our orderly life. Vanessa is stressed out all the time. The kids are confused. My heart started to pound. Chaos. I repeated, stunned. I just love them, Mark. I'm their grandmother. That's all I'm trying to be. He shook his head. You're trying to be their mother. You're trying to recreate my childhood with them. But that childhood is over. I'm not that little boy anymore.
This is my family now.
Me, Vanessa, Chloe, and Noah. We have our own way of doing things. And you don't respect that. Tears were streaming down my face. I didn't even try to wipe them away. I have always respected you, Mark. I have always tried. I walk on eggshells in this house. I'm scared to breathe too loud. I just want to be a part of your lives. I have no one else. You're all I have. That's when he said it. He stood up from the stool. He put his coffee cup down with a quiet, final-sounding clink. He looked me right in the eye, and in a calm, steady voice, he said, "That's the problem, Mom. You need to find someone else. You need to build your own life. Because you're not my family anymore. Not the way you think. You're my mother, and I'll always respect you for that. But this, the visits, the constant need to be included, it has to stop. It's too much. For all of us." The world tilted. I grabbed onto the kitchen counter to steady myself. The words hung in the air between us, sharp and poisonous. You're not my family anymore. It wasn't said in anger. It was said with a cold, calm finality that was so much worse. It was a verdict, a life sentence, passed down by my own child, and I don't know how long I stood there. It could have been seconds. It could have been minutes. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of a clock somewhere. And then a small voice from the hallway. "Daddy? Nana?" It was Chloe, standing in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. She had heard. Maybe not the words, but the awful feeling in the air. Vanessa appeared behind her, quickly scooping her up. "Come on, sweetie, let's go get dressed," she said, shooting a look at Mark. A look that said, "Handle this." She disappeared with Chloe, and I was alone with my son. I had to get out. I couldn't breathe. I walked past him, back to the guest room. My legs felt like they were made of lead. I grabbed my small suitcase. I hadn't even unpacked it. I opened the closet to get my old coat. And that's when I saw it. The dollhouse. It was sitting on the top shelf of the closet, in the back, hidden. He hadn't even let her keep it. He had taken it away and hidden it, like a shameful secret. I stared at it for a long moment. The little curtains I had sewn. The little family inside. All that love, discarded and hidden in a dark closet. I left it there. I walked back down the hallway, past the kitchen where Mark still stood, silent. I opened the front door. I walked out onto the driveway. It was a beautiful, sunny morning. The birds were singing. The world was going on, bright and normal, while mine had just ended. I heard the door open behind me. Mark walked out and stood on the step. He didn't come closer. He just stood there, watching me. I put my suitcase down for a moment. I turned to look at him, one last time. I wanted to remember this moment. I wanted to burn it into my memory. My son, standing in front of his perfect house, casting me out of his life. And that's when the smile came. It wasn't a choice. It just spread across my face, a strange, calm mask. It was the face of a woman who had nothing left to lose. He looked confused for a second, maybe even a little scared by that smile. I picked up my suitcase. I walked to my old car, got in, and drove away. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I couldn't. I drove for an hour before I had to pull over to the side of the road. The smile finally crumbled, and I put my head on the steering wheel, and I sobbed. I cried for the little boy I lost. I cried for the grandchildren I would never see grow up. I cried for the death of my family, but I couldn't go home. Home was a 2-hour drive away, but it wasn't just the distance. My little house was filled with memories of Mark. Every photograph, every drawing on the fridge, every Little League trophy on the shelf. It was a shrine to the son I had lost. I couldn't face it. Not yet. So I found a small, Cheap motel on the edge of a town I didn't know. I paid for a week in cash. The room was small and smelled faintly of bleach and stale cigarette smoke. But it had a bed, a tiny bathroom, and a television that got 3 channels. It was enough. It was a place to hide. For 3 days, I barely moved. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, just like I had in their guest room. I replayed every moment of my life as a mother. I wondered where I had gone wrong. Had I loved him too much? Had I been too clingy? Should I have pushed back more when Vanessa started changing things? The questions circled in my mind like vultures. I didn't eat much. I drank coffee from the little machine in the room. I didn't call anyone. Who would I call? My few friends were back home. And what would I say? My son told me I'm not his family anymore. The shame was a physical weight on my chest. On the 4th day, the motel owner, a kind woman named Rosa, knocked on my door. She was probably in her 60s, with a warm, weathered face. She said she hadn't seen me leave the room and wanted to make sure I was okay. I must have looked a mess. She didn't ask questions. She just handed me a plate of warm, homemade tamales and a glass of cold milk. "You eat," she said firmly. "You look like you need it." I took the plate, and the simple kindness of it broke something loose inside me. I ate the tamales, and they were the most delicious thing I had ever tasted. It was love, in the form of food, from a complete stranger. It reminded me that kindness still existed in the world. That small act was a turning point. It was a tiny crack of light in the darkness. I got up, took a shower, and put on clean clothes. I looked at myself in the blurry motel mirror. I looked old. I looked tired. But I also saw something else. I saw a survivor. I had survived the loss of my parents. I had survived the death of my husband. I was going to survive this, too. I needed a plan. I couldn't live in a motel forever. I had a small amount of savings, but it wouldn't last long. I thought about moving back home, but the thought of that empty house filled me with dread. So I made a decision. A hard one. I decided to let go. I couldn't make Mark love me the way I wanted him to. I couldn't force my way into his life. Holding on was like trying to hold smoke in my hands. The tighter I gripped, the faster it disappeared. The only way to have any peace was to open my hands and let it go. I called a real estate agent back home and put my house on the market.
It was a painful call to make.
I told them to sell it as is, with everything in it. All the memories, the photographs, the furniture Thomas had built, Mark's baseball glove. I let it all go. A weight lifted from my shoulders with that one phone call. It wasn't my home anymore. My son had made sure of that. It was just a house. I used the money from the sale to buy a small, rundown fixer-upper bungalow in the town where Rose's motel was. It was a mess. The paint was peeling, the garden was overgrown, and the kitchen was straight out of the 1950s. But it was mine. It had a big front porch, just like my old house. It had a sunny little room that would be perfect for my sewing. For the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny spark of something that felt like hope. It wasn't joy. It was too soon for joy. But it was a purpose. I threw myself into fixing up the house. It kept my hands busy and my mind occupied. I painted walls. I pulled weeds. I planted new flowers. I scrubbed floors until they shone. Rose's husband, Miguel, helped me fix a leaky faucet. Their daughter, Eleanor, helped me pick out new curtains. Slowly, piece by piece, I was building a new life. A small life. A simple life. But it was my life. Not a life lived on the sidelines of someone else's. One afternoon, about 3 months after I left Mark's house, I was sitting on my front porch, sipping iced tea and watching the sunset. The air was warm and smelled of the honeysuckle I had planted along the fence. It was peaceful. For the first time in a long time, my mind was quiet. And then I saw a car pull up to the curb. A familiar car. My heart stopped. It was Mark. He got out slowly. He looked thinner. He looked tired. He stood by his car for a long moment, just looking at me sitting on the porch. Then he walked up the path. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He looked at the new flowers, the fresh paint on the railings. "This is nice, Mom," he said. His voice was quiet. Not hard like before. Just tired. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. He took a deep breath. I was wrong, he said. The words seemed to cost him a great effort. I was so wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me. I needed you to know that I know it. I still didn't speak. I just waited. He sat down on the top step, not next to me, but close. He put his head in his hands. Vanessa left me, he said, his voice muffled. 3 weeks ago. She took the kids. She said I was too cold. Too much like my father? I don't know. She said she felt like she was living with a stranger. And when she said that, I finally understood. I understood what I did to you. I made you feel like a stranger. I pushed away the one person who has always loved me, no matter what. He looked up at me, and his eyes were wet. I am so sorry, Mama. Hearing him call me Mama broke the dam. All the pain, the anger, the loneliness I had held inside for so long, it all came flooding out. But it wasn't in screams or accusations. It was in tears. Silent tears that rolled down my cheeks. I looked at my son, sitting on my porch steps, broken and lost, just like I had been. My heart, which I thought had turned to stone, cracked open. And what came out wasn't anger. It was just love. Tired, worn out, but still there. Buried deep, but not dead. He didn't stay long that first day. He just needed to say he was sorry. He needed to see me. We sat on the porch until the sun went down and the stars came out. We didn't talk much. There was too much to say, and it was all too big. He told me about the kids, that he was seeing them on weekends. He told me he had moved into a small apartment. He told me he was seeing a therapist, trying to understand why he had become so hard. Before he left, he hugged me. It was a real hug. The first real one in years. He held me tight, and for just a second, he was my little boy again. And I was his mama. Our relationship now is different. It's fragile, like a tiny seedling that needs careful tending. We talk on the phone once a week. He comes to visit every few weeks. He sits on my porch, and we drink iced tea. Sometimes we don't talk at all. We just sit and watch the world go by. He's learning to slow down. I'm learning to let him come to me. The door is always open, but I don't stand in it waiting anymore. I have my own life now. My garden. My sewing circle with Rosa and Elena. My book club at the little library in town. It took a long time before I saw Chloe and Noah again. Mark brought them one sunny Saturday afternoon. They were shy at first, standing behind their father's legs. Chloe was bigger now, more serious. Noah clung to a toy truck. I didn't rush them. I didn't try to pick them up or spin them around. I just smiled and said, "Hello, my darlings. Would you like to see Nana's garden? I have tomatoes just like your daddy used to help me pick when he was a little boy." Slowly, carefully, they came out from behind their father. Chloe looked at the tomatoes. Noah looked at a big, fat bumblebee on a flower. "It won't hurt you," I said softly. "He's just getting his dinner." We spent the afternoon in the garden. It wasn't perfect. It was a little awkward. But it was a start. A new beginning. The lesson I learned? It wasn't about blame. It wasn't about who was right and who was wrong. It was about the terrible, beautiful, complicated power of love. My love for my son was so strong, so deep, that it almost destroyed me when he pushed it away. And his fear of that love, his need to build his own life separate from it, almost destroyed him. We both got lost for a while. Love isn't about holding on so tight that you smother. And it isn't about pushing away so hard that you break. It's about finding that gentle middle ground. It's about having your own life, your own strength, so that you can stand beside the people you love, not cling to them. It's about having an open door and a warm porch light, and the patience to wait for them to find their way back. And sometimes they do. Sometimes the door opens, and there they are. Not the person you remember, but a different person. A person who is also learning. A person who is also sorry. And you have a choice. You can close the door on the pain of the past, or you can open it just a crack and let a little bit of the future in. I chose to open it. Just a crack. And that small crack let in enough light to start to heal us both.